Ellie was done. Done with people, done with work, with life, just with everything. Life had not been kind to them. Their father had died in a fire started by a drunken rage, which left Ellie with burns on her arm. Their mother vanished for years after, only for her to reappear in a news article reporting her death. Nobody ever contacted Ellie about it. They just stumbled upon the article while scrolling through Twitter. And on top of all this was the incredible financial burdens they were facing. Getting a job was no easy feat, getting rejected with every application. The rent on their one-bed flat was rising at an insane price too. Everything was just wrong. Today wasn't planned. Ellie had originally just decided to go for a walk, to catch some fresh air and breathe for a while. Of course, they knew this was stupid. It wouldn't help anything. The idea that simply going for a walk would solve all your problems was a ridiculous thing that stemmed from people on the internet acting like they know best. But still, they went. If nothing else, it would be a break from filling in forms. After quickly throwing together an outfit consisting of an old flannel shirt that had seen better days, jeans and a t-shirt with the quote, "I don't feel so good," from Avengers Infinity War slapped over it, rather ironically, Ellie had thought, and then fluffing up their now fading red-dyed hair, they checked how they looked in a mirror and shrugged. It would do. It was just a walk, after all. They had gone down to their childhood home, the remains practically untouched since the fire. There was a forest that led to an old viaduct. Ellie's father used to take them there as a child, but it was now a painful reminder, one that gave Ellie that one push closer to the edge. If life was just going to be cruel to them all the time, then why have a life at all? So there they stood, on the edge of that very viaduct, with their eyes fixed to the water below. They watched as it thrashed against the jagged rocks that stood littered across the river. Just one step, they thought. One step and they'd be free. They were determined that this was it. But the longer Ellie stood there, the more tears fell from their eyes, dripping down across their now red, raw cheeks. They took a sharp inhale of the cold and bitey air and wiped away the tears with their sleeve. Once the tears were cleared, something caught Ellie's eye. They had attempted to write a note, a goodbye, even though they didn't think anyone would read it. Nobody knew or seemed to care who they were. It took many attempts to write that note. Most of it ended up as scribbled out words, and the ink had bled out because of teardrops landing on the paper and the fresh ink. Ellie had eventually given up on it and tossed it aside, but the wind seemed to have other ideas. Ellie watched as the note blew around in the wind. Other leaves caught up with it, the little collection flying further and further from their sight. They sighed. It was okay. It wasn't going to be read, they thought. It'll just be lost in the forest. Not many came here to this place anyway. I am not going to be missed. Elsewhere in that very forest, for a brief moment of time, the wind felt like it began to worsen. The sound of groaning engines blending into the whooshing of wind through the trees, with a blue box forming in the clearing of the forest. A loud thud seemed to complete the odd display this box presented. To any passerby, this was just an old police box. But to the owner and the occupant of the box, this was their home. The TARDIS. The doors clicked open, and the occupant took a cautious step out. She looked around and shut the doors behind her. Well, this definitely isn't the Back to the Future premiere. The Doctor sighed as she pushed her steampunk-esque goggles up from her eyes. She was dressed in a somewhat smart casual combo, a smart red trench coat and a blue waistcoat, accompanied with blue jeans and a star-patterned shirt, all of which felt completed by her star-patterned scarf that sat just over the top of the coat. She rubbed her fingerless gloved hands together. The cold wind nipped at her fingertips. Despite having not turned up in the right place, the doctor had an insistent curiosity that meant exploration was always a necessity. She turned to double-check the doors were locked, and then began to walk off in a direction unknown. As she walked, she reached into her brown satchel and pulled out a cylindrical device with a ball on the top of it. Pressing a button and going ahead to wave it around, the sonic screwdriver let out a whirring sound as it scanned the area. The doctor then paused and took a look at the small screen on the device. All clear. Huh. That makes a change. No impending danger? No secret Dalek plots? The doctor was wary. She didn't usually have much opportunity to just relax. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was her chance to do just that. No, of course it wasn't. Just as the doctor put the sonic screwdriver away, she found a piece of paper being slapped into her face by a large gust of wind. She spluttered and grabbed the paper. Noticing the scribbled writing across it, the doctor uncrumpled the paper to read it a bit more clearly. Upon realizing the situation, she stuffed the paper into her satchel, swapping it out for her sonic screwdriver once more, and ran as fast as she could in the direction the paper had come from. Her coat flapped behind her as she ran. Every time her foot hit the ground was another vital second. The doctor activated the sonic as she ran, scanning for any human life forms and proceeding to run towards signals, hoping it wasn't too late. After all, she did prefer to be on time. Ellie inhaled the cold air once more. The sharpness of it made them shiver. Or was that just fear? They couldn't tell. Their mind had begun to race, all these thoughts clouding their mind. This was an opportunity for them. They could escape the pain life seemed so determined to throw at them. But yet, it could go wrong. What if it wasn't quick? What if I survive? They thought. What if... Ellie shook their head. No. They had decided. This was it. They were going to do this. This was their time. They looked at the scars left on their non-burned arm. Some looked worse than others, some looked fresher. Reminders of what they considered to be failures. They took another breath, slowly raised their foot to take that step. The adrenaline kicking in already started to feel like the pain of it all was going away. A small but weak smile formed on their face and they closed their eyes, just as they were about to fall. Wait! Ellie's eyes shot open, their heart almost leaping out of their throat as they gripped onto the old broken metal railings of the bridge, their heart beating erratically against their chest as they stared down at the height they were about to fall from. They turned to see who had yelled. Please, just wait, the doctor panted, a little out of breath. She gripped one of the railings and took a short moment. Ellie stared, confused and perhaps a little angry at the strange woman. They'd never met. She was a stranger to them. She doesn't know anything about me. Why is she trying to stop me? Ellie thought, a little frustrated. Another failure to the list, they thought. Now a bit more regained, the doctor stood up properly and faced Ellie. Found your note? Well, I say that. It found me, she said, pulling the note from her satchel and waving it. She then took a step to peer over the bridge and whistled at the impressive view and the height. Whoa, that's very high, okay. Excuse me? Ellie, now definitely frustrated, gave a sharp glare. Oh, sorry, should introduce myself. Hello, I'm the doctor. She put out her hand to offer a handshake. The doctor. You're a bit late for that. Waiting lists finally down, are they? Ellie ignored the offer of a handshake, leaving the doctor to awkwardly retract her hand. Not that kind of doctor. Well, sort of. I was once. Or twice. I was definitely a doctor for cheese making once. She frowned, doubting if that last bit was indeed actually a definite or not. Then why are you here? Just because you found a note? How did you even know where to go? Because I read that note. The universe and time haven't been kind to you, have they? Ellie went silent, just shaking their head to show their answer. The doctor sat down on the bridge edge, next to where Ellie stood, and patted the spot next to her, a suggestion for Ellie to sit down. They stood for a moment longer. The doctor just patiently waited as Ellie considered this. Begrudgingly, they eventually sat down next to her. I'm Ellie, by the way. Nice to meet you, Ellie. The doctor offered a handshake again. Ellie glanced down at the hand and decided to cautiously shake it. Can I tell you something, Ellie? They nodded slowly. Life hasn't been kind to me either. The worlds I've seen destroyed. Friends I've lost. She paused, almost lost in thought for a moment. Even my own world was destroyed. More than once, too. I can't deny the thought of doing this myself has floated around my brain quite a bit over the centuries. The universe is truly not fair. Ellie was torn at how to respond. What the doctor had said had sounded nonsensical. Worlds destroyed? Her own world? It had to be a fiction she was just making up. But there was something about the doctor that Ellie just wanted to trust. Subtle investigation it was. What do you mean, your own world? Yes, very subtle, they thought. Sarcastically, of course. Well, that's a whole other story. Short version, I'm not from this planet. Long version, I'll maybe tell you if you tell me more about you. This was new to Ellie. Of course, people had asked about them before. It's a very common thing to tell people about yourself. However, most people who had asked and listened before often responded with negativity and transphobic retorts about non-binary identity. They decided to play this with caution, all cards close as possible to their chest. Ellie, they, them pronouns. I like art, I guess. Creating it, I mean. They looked down at their scarred arm. One of my escapes. The doctor noted the arm but didn't press to ask about it. She understood what it was given the context clues. Well, I'm the doctor, as I've said, and I use she and they pronouns. At the moment, at least. It really depends. Honestly, regeneration is a tricky one for keeping track. But I suppose you could say it's like gender fluid. I think that's the one. She paused and furrowed her brow. Sort of. It's vastly different, but probably the simplest way to describe it, Earth-wise. The doctor nodded, setting with that choice of comparison. Ellie let out a small laugh. The doctor laughed in turn too. It was the first time Ellie had laughed in such a long time. But it didn't last long. A tear began to slip down their cheek. The doctor brushed it off for them. You don't seem too alarmed by all I've said. Most people would have, and have done, a runner or called me mad by now. Ellie looked face to face with the doctor. It was a good point. But with all that had happened in their lifetime, were aliens a wild stretch? There were all those stories they used to hear. Some kind of killer robot tin cans. Metal men marching all across the world. There was even talk about one of the former prime ministers being an alien. Maybe even more than one. They remembered seeing something about Saxongate in their modern studies textbooks. Nothing to lose if I trust you, I guess. Ellie subconsciously began to lightly draw along their scarred arm with her other hand, the fingers following each individual scar. You say you've lost all these worlds, these friends. How do you keep going? The doctor had pondered the question that had been put to her. It was a good question. She often had asked herself that too. Throughout all her adventures she had lost so much. River, Lucy, Adric, just to name a few. Honestly, I don't know. Sometimes I just keep going. I keep running. She turned to look at Ellie directly. Sometimes it just catches up with me. Ellie saw a look in the doctor's eyes. They could see the hurt. They could see how old her eyes truly were. She had seen so much. Eyes so old on a face so young. It almost scared them. I know the feeling, Ellie finally uttered. They had tried running from the bad. It always caught them. Something new always happened. I didn't plan to do this. Not today, at least. They turned away from the doctor's gaze. You see the house over there? You can just see the remains if you look hard enough. That was my childhood home. You thought it would help. To confront it, to fight it, to get closure? Yeah, ish. I don't know. I don't feel this ever been about closure. I don't know. The tears began to flow once more. Ellie didn't even bother to hold them back. They just leaned into the doctor. The doctor cautiously pulled them closer and hugged them gently. It's okay. Let out. For the next few minutes, Ellie just cried. This was so much to take in. Moments ago they were ready to end their life, and now here they were, being confronted by a possibly mad woman they had only just met. I'm sorry, Ellie spoke as the tears began to clear. For now, at least. They gently pushed the doctor off them and shifted back to their original spot. The doctor wasn't 100% sure what to do next. Situations like this were difficult. Depression isn't something that can be fixed. But maybe offering an alternative escape could. Don't be sorry, Ellie. I've got an idea. I'm going to make a deal with you. The doctor gave a small smile, much to Ellie's confusion. What deal? Come with me, she said, offering her hand for the third time that day. It won't stop your pain. It won't heal anything. But maybe, just maybe, it can allow you to escape that little bit longer. And if it doesn't, if you want, we'll come right back here. Ellie pondered this. They looked again at the waters below that could be their future grave. The urge to jump was still there, like an itch in their brain. But what was there to lose by going with the doctor? As she had said, they would come right back here. Their hands joined. The doctor leapt up to her feet, which caught Ellie off guard, almost tripping as they were pulled up along with the doctor's leap. Just one thing I need to do first. Ellie took their hand back from the doctor's grasp. I won't be long, and I will be back, I promise. They let out the smallest smile. The doctor nodded and sat back down. I'll be here, waiting. The ruins of Ellie's childhood home had been reclaimed by nature. Weeds had begun to grow through the burnt-out floorboards, and even a small tree had begun to grow in the old kitchen. This was where Ellie needed to go. They approached the place where the front door once stood and cautiously stepped inside. Things hadn't been cleared, even after all these years. Some furniture still stood in place, burnt or charred in places, with occasional bits covered in moss. As they stepped through the house, vague memories flooded back to Ellie. They could just make out the places where they had once played with their father, some places more notable than others. Ellie stepped into what was once the living room and looked across the room. They spotted a melted child's doctor's set, toys that were once much loved. Ellie let out a small smile as they remembered the times they had pretended to give their father a checkup. Ellie shook their head quickly. They had a task and they needed to get on with it. Exiting the living room and crossing through the hall, they found what they were looking for. A room which looked like it was once for a child, melted plastic from old toys permanently looking as if they were dripping from the also melted toy box sat next to a bed that had long since collapsed. In the corner of the room, an old charred set of drawers sat broken but open. A small nest had been made in the top drawer, which brought a small giggle to Ellie. It was fun to think that something had moved into this ruined place. It was, however, what was next to the drawers that Ellie was actually after. A small grey backpack sat neatly beside them. They grabbed it, opening it quickly to check through. The contents were a blue folder of old children's drawings, some with burnt edges. Ellie was holding them the night of the fire and they never let go. The drawings were a collection of memories. Times Ellie had gone to the park, the seaside, or even just at home. Treasured memories. The most treasured drawing in the collection was one of them and their parents. But this was also the most damaged of the drawings. The mum's side had almost completely gone. The father's side was burnt but still clearly visible, and a tear in the paper had formed where Ellie's chest was. They thought it was quite symbolic when they first noticed it. Putting the drawings aside, they continued to rummage through. The bag was pretty much just a memory bag, some photos, some jewellery, but at the bottom of the bag they found what they were looking for. Their phone, at least their backup. It still had plenty of charge, and they only had placed it in the bag earlier that day. Ellie sat back against the wall. They looked at the phone, opening their music app. The songs mostly consisting of songs from the 80s, maybe with some 70s and a few other years dotted in if it caught their ear. One song that they had been listening to for many years now was Asleep by the Smiths. Pressing play, they just sat and listened, letting the memories of this old house replay once more in their mind. One more attempt to maybe achieve that closure. If it was closure that they truly wanted.
Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. And then leave me alone. Don't try to wake me in the morning, 'cause I will be gone. Don't feel bad for me, I want you to know. Deep in the cell of my heart, I will feel so glad to go.
It had been a while since Ellie had left. The doctor was a little worried but had faith in them. She had kept herself occupied by continuing to read a novelisation of Back to the Future, still a little annoyed with the TARDIS for failing to take her to the movie premiere. Maybe she'd try again sometime. Just as she reached the end of the final chapter, she spotted Ellie making their way back up the path. "Ah, good, I was getting worried," the doctor grinned. Ellie let out a cautious smile in response, but the doctor noticed they'd been crying again. She wanted to ask, but decided to take a more cautious approach and let Ellie tell her in their own time. She also spotted that Ellie was now carrying a backpack. "Check you, all ready to go." Just a few important things. Ellie gripped the bag straps a little tighter. "So, where is it we're going?" "This way," the doctor yelled, wandering off at once. Ellie hoped that this wasn't going to be a constant thing, but proceeded to follow A tiny little spark of excitement had grown in their heart. It wasn't a long walk to the TARDIS. The old box stuck out like a sore thumb, the blue against the green. Ellie was surprised they hadn't noticed it from the viaduct, but concluded it wasn't exactly something they were thinking about at the time. One other thing that crossed their mind was, a box? You've taken me to a box. This is the grand wonderful escape. Ellie gave a disgruntled, confused look. Patience, patience, the Doctor urged as she unlocked the TARDIS doors and pushed them open. She then stepped aside and watched as Ellie's eyes widened. It's... Ellie stuttered in shock as they stepped in, baffled by the impossible sight before them. They're gonna say it, the Doctor thought. They're gonna say the line. It's small outside but big inside? The Doctor frowned and went in after them. The interior of the Doctor's vessel was lit with pinks and blues. The walls were covered in a circular pattern, the round things as they'd affectionately been named. Entrances to corridors stood to either side of the console room, just teasing how much bigger this place could be. In the centre of the room stood the console unit, a steampunky-like design with 6 control panels on each side of its hexagon-shaped base, completed with a rotor reaching up into the ceiling with a ridiculous amount of cables. Most people usually say bigger on the inside. You're joining a very exclusive list of people who haven't. The Doctor laughed, as she then flicked a switch which caused the doors to close behind Ellie. The sound of groaning engines occurred within the forest once again as the TARDIS began to fade away. Dimensionally transcendental sciences aside, the Doctor grinned. Welcome aboard, Ellie. And they allowed themselves this moment to grin back. There was a new thrill in their heart. The pain hadn't left. But this could be a good escape. For now, at least. Now, how do you feel about the 1980s?